The morning mist clung to Havenbrook Valley like a shroud, thick and ghostly in the pre-dawn light. Ilara pressed her forehead against the cool glass of her cottage window, watching the fog swallow the cobblestone paths between humble homes. Her breath fogged the pain as her heart hammered against her ribs. The air itself felt different today, charged with an electricity that made her skin prickle, and her ancient. Mark itch beneath the worn fabric of her sleeve. "They're coming," her grandmother Mira whispered, from the rocking chair by the dying hearth fire. The old woman's milky eyes stared into the embers, seeing things Ilara couldn't. "I can feel the earth trembling beneath their boots." "The Orc King's shadow reaches far, child." "Too far?" Ilara turned from the window, her chestnut hair falling across her face. At 23, she had lived her entire life in this peaceful valley, tending sheep and weaving cloth alongside the other villagers. War was something that happened elsewhere, to other people, in stories told by traveling merchants. But those stories had grown darker over the past year. Village after village had fallen to the Orc King's expansion, each settlement absorbed into his growing empire, without mercy or hesitation. "What do we do, Gran?" Ilara's voice cracked, despite her attempt at composure. "Elder Petros says we should surrender immediately. He says resistance only brings slaughter." Mira's weathered hand reached out, gnarled fingers beckoning. Ilara crossed the small room and knelt beside her grandmother's chair, feeling the warmth of those ancient hands cup her face. "You, my darling girl, will do what you must when the moment comes. The blood in your veins runs deeper than you know, deeper than even I fully understand." Before Ilara could question her grandmother's cryptic words, the village bell began to toll. Not the cheerful rhythm that called them to festivals or market days, but a desperate, frantic clanging that froze her blood. The sound every villager had dreaded for months had finally come. They were here. Ilara raced outside, her bare feet slapping against cold stone. The mist was beginning to lift, burned away by the rising sun, and through the dissipating fog she saw them. A column of warriors marching down the eastern road, their armor catching the morning light like dark mirrors. At the front, mounted on a massive war beast that looked like a cross between a bear and a wolf, rode their leader. Even from a distance he commanded attention. Taller than any human, his shoulders broad as a doorway, the Orc warlord wore armor that seemed forged from shadow and steel. His skin was the color of storm clouds, grey with hints of deep green, and twin tusks curved upward from his lower jaw. Black hair fell past his shoulders, bound with leather cords and small bones that rattled as he moved. But it was his eyes that captured Ilara's attention when he drew closer. Eyes that burned with an amber light, intelligent and calculating. The villagers gathered in the square, a pitiful assembly of farmers, weavers and shepherds. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. Old men gripped walking sticks with white knuckles, knowing such makeshift weapons were useless against trained warriors. Elder Petros stood at the front, his ceremonial robes hanging loosely on his thin frame, age spots covering his trembling hands. The warlord dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. His warriors fanned out behind him, 20 strong, each one a wall of muscle and menace. The silence that fell over the square was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind whistling through the valley and a child's muffled sob. "I am Kael'thar, first blade of King Urgoth the Uniter," the warlord announced, his voice like gravel rolling down a mountainside. He spoke the common tongue with only a slight accent, each word deliberate and clear. "Your lands now fall under the dominion of the Orc King. You will swear fealty, pay tribute, and provide soldiers for the royal army. Those who comply will be protected. Those who resist will be examples." Elder Petros stepped forward, his legs shaking but his voice steady. "We are simple people, Lord Kael'thar. We have no warriors to offer, but we will not resist. Please show mercy to the children and the old. We will swear whatever oaths you require." Kael'thar's expression didn't change. He pulled a rolled parchment from his belt and thrust it toward the elder. "These are the terms. Mark it with your seal and blood. Then each household head will come forward to receive the king's brand." Ilara felt bile rise in her throat. The brand. She had seen it on refugees who had passed through their valley. A mark burned into the flesh of the forearm, claiming them as subjects of King Urgoth. Some said it was merely symbolic. Others whispered that it bound you to the king's will. That disobedience brought agonizing pain through the mark itself. Elder Petros took the parchment with shaking hands, and one of Kael'thar's warriors stepped forward with a brazier already glowing with hot coals. An iron brand rested in the flames, the symbol of the Orc King's dominion, heating to white-hot intensity. The ceremony began. One by one, the household heads came forward. Ilara watched as the blacksmith, then the miller, then the tavern keeper each received the brand. The sizzle of burning flesh, the screams quickly bitten back, the smell of charred skin mixing with the morning air. Each villager stumbled away, clutching their arm, tears streaming down faces contorted in pain. "Next," Kael'thar commanded, his voice emotionless, mechanical. He was a tool of his king, nothing more. His amber eyes swept the crowd without really seeing the individuals, just counting subjects, claiming territory. Ilara's grandmother had followed her to the square, moving slowly with her walking stick. Now she leaned close and whispered urgently, "When he calls for you, do not hide the mark. Let him see." "What mark?" "Gran, what are you?" "Ilara Thornwood." The warrior calling names shouted her family name. "Step forward." Her heart lurched. She was registered as head of household since her parents' death 3 winters past. She had no choice. Ilara moved through the crowd on legs that felt like water, aware of every eye upon her, aware of Kael'thar's amber gaze, finally focusing on her specifically. She was small compared to him, barely reaching his chest, even when he stood. Up close, she could see the scars that crossed his grey-green skin, the marks of countless battles. His armor was inscribed with runes she couldn't read, and weapons hung from his belt that looked like they could cleave a man in two. "Your arm," he commanded, and a warrior seized her roughly, pulling her toward the brazier. Ilara's sleeve tore as the warrior yanked her forward, and suddenly the world seemed to slow. The fabric ripped away from her left forearm, exposing skin that had always been slightly different from the rest of her body. There, just below her elbow, was what she had always thought was a birthmark. A pattern of silvery white lines, delicate and intricate, like lace made of moonlight. It had always been there, always faint. Something she covered out of habit, because it made her different. But now, as the morning sun broke fully over the mountains, and its light touched her exposed skin, the mark blazed. Silver-white light erupted from the sigil, bright enough that people gasped and shielded their eyes. The patterns seemed to move, flowing like liquid across her skin, geometric shapes interlocking with what looked like ancient script. Kael'thar froze. The brand slipped from his grip and clattered against the stone square, forgotten. His amber eyes went wide, and for the first time, emotion cracked through his stoic mask. Shock, disbelief, and something else. Something that looked like fear, mixed with reverence. The massive warlord dropped to one knee so suddenly that his armor clanged. His warriors stared in confusion, hands moving to weapons, uncertain what threat had caused their leader to kneel. The villagers looked between each other, equally baffled. "Salmora Nethys," Kael'thar breathed, his voice barely a whisper. It was not the common tongue, but something older, rougher. Then in words everyone could understand, "The Moonborn lives. The prophecy speaks truth." Chaos erupted in the square. Kael'thar's warriors shouted questions in their native tongue, weapons now fully drawn, but aimed at no specific threat. Villagers backed away from Ilara as though she had transformed into something dangerous before their eyes. Even Elder Petros stared at her with a mixture of wonder and fear that made her stomach twist. "I don't understand," Ilara managed, her voice small and frightened. The glowing mark on her arm was already beginning to fade back to its usual faint silver, as though the burst of light had exhausted it. "I don't know what this means. It's just a birthmark. It's always been there." Kael'thar slowly rose to his feet, but kept his head bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that looked alien on such a fierce warrior. "That is no birthmark, lady. That is the seal of Luneth, the mark of the Moonborn bloodline. I've seen it only once before, in the most ancient texts preserved in the king's own treasury. The scholars believed it lost, that the last bearer died 300 years ago in the purge of the Silver Courts. He turned to his warriors and barked orders in Orcish. The soldiers sheathed their weapons, but looked no less confused, their eyes darting between their commander and the small human woman who had somehow brought him to his knees. One warrior, younger than the others with tusks barely past his lips, dared to speak. "Commander, what does this mean?" "Our orders were clear. Brand the village and move on." Kael'thar's expression hardened as he faced his subordinate. "Our orders have become complicated, Groth. The Moonborn are spoken of in the old oaths, the ones that bound our ancestors to the alliance before the Sundering War. If she truly bears the mark, then we are bound by laws older than King Urgoth's reign. Older than the kingdom itself." Ilara's mind reeled. Moonborn, Silver Courts, ancient oaths. Nothing made sense. She looked to her grandmother and found Mira pushing through the crowd with surprising strength, her milky eyes somehow finding Ilara unerringly. "I told you that your blood ran deep," Mira said, reaching out to touch the mark on Ilara's arm with reverent fingers. "Your mother knew. She made me promise to tell you only when the time was right, when hiding would be more dangerous than revealing the truth. That time, it seems, has arrived. Mother knew?" Ilara felt tears prick her eyes. "Gran, please, what am I?" Mira's expression softened. "Your mother was not born in this valley, child. She fled here pregnant with you, running from those who would have killed you in the womb. The Moonborn were hunted to extinction because of their power, because they could unite the fractured races under a single banner. They were mediators, peace-bringers, blessed by the moon goddess Luneth herself. Your bloodline once stood between humans and orcs as friends to both." Kael'thar stepped closer, and Ilara instinctively moved back. Despite his deference, he was still massive, still dangerous. He noticed her fear and stopped, holding his hands out to show he meant no immediate threat. The texts speak of the Moonborn as those who could command the allegiance of all peoples, Kael'thar explained, his voice careful and measured. Not through magic or force, but through an innate authority that transcends the normal bounds of leadership. When the mark activates, it is said that even kings must listen. The old laws, written in blood and oath bond, require that all warriors who bear the traditional marks of service must protect and serve a Moonborn if one should ever return. He pulled aside his collar, revealing his own marking on the side of his neck. A symbol in dark green ink, intricate and old. This is the mark of duty, given to all who serve in the king's elite forces. It was designed by the original Orc clans, who fought alongside the Moonborn in ancient times. "It binds me to the old ways, even as I serve my current king," one of the other warriors spoke up, an older orc with graying hair and numerous scars. "Commander, King Urgoth will not care about ancient prophecies. He will see this as a threat to his power. If word reaches him that a Moonborn lives, then we must ensure word reaches him carefully," Kael'thar finished, his jaw setting in determination. "And we must protect her until we understand what this means for all of us." Elder Petros found his voice, thin and reedy. "What of our village? What of the oath and the brand?" Kael'thar turned to the elder, and Ilara saw calculation in those amber eyes. "You will not be branded. Not today. I will report that this territory requires special consideration, that there are complications that must be brought before the king himself. It will buy us time, but not much." He looked back at Ilara. "You must come with us. If you remain here and other forces arrive, forces not bound by the old marks, they will kill you and burn this village to ashes for harboring you." "No," Ilara said immediately, finding her voice at last. "I won't leave my home. I won't leave my grandmother. I don't even understand what this mark means or why it matters. For all I know, this is some elaborate trick." Kael'thar's expression suggested he wasn't used to being refused. "Lady Ilara, I understand your fear, but I swear on my honor as First Blade that I mean you no harm. The opposite, in fact. Prophecy speaks of the Moonborn's return, heralding either a new age of peace or the final war that will drown the world in blood. Which comes to pass may depend on whether you survive the next few days. Mira squeezed Ilara's hand. Go with him, child. He speaks truth. I can feel it in my bones. And besides, she added with a small, sad smile, I'm too old to be of use in whatever is coming. But you might be the key to everything. Your mother died to give you a chance at life. Don't waste her sacrifice by hiding in this valley. Ilara felt the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her. The villagers watched in fearful silence. The orc warriors waited for their commander's orders, and Kael'thar stood before her, this warrior who had come to enslave her people, now offering protection instead. Bound by oaths she didn't understand to a bloodline she never knew she possessed. If I go with you, Ilara said slowly, you'll protect my village. No branding, no tribute until this is resolved. You have my word, Kael'thar said, then added, and the word of an orc is not given lightly. Break faith with you, and I break faith with ancestors going back 1,000 years. No true warrior would bear such shame. Ilara looked at her grandmother one last time. Mira nodded, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, but her expression firm. Around them, the village that had been Ilara's whole world waited to see what the girl with the glowing mark would decide. I'll go, Ilara whispered. Then louder, with more strength, I'll go with you. But know this, Kael'thar, first blade of the Orc King, if you betray me or my people, mark or no mark, I will find a way to make you regret it. A ghost of a smile touched Kael'thar's scarred face. Spoken like true nobility. The Moonborn blood runs strong in you indeed. Come, we have a long journey ahead, and many questions to answer before we reach the capital. They left Havenbrook Valley within the hour. Ilara was given no time to pack more than a small satchel with a change of clothes, some bread, and a silver pendant that had belonged to her mother. She embraced her grandmother one final time, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and wood smoke that had meant home her entire life. Be brave, Mira whispered in her ear. Your mother was the bravest woman I ever knew. You have her courage. Trust it when doubt creeps in. The journey began along the eastern trade road, the same path the orcs had used to enter the valley. Kael'thar offered Ilara a place on his massive war beast, but she refused, choosing instead to walk alongside the mounted warriors. Pride, perhaps, or maybe just a need to maintain some small measure of independence in a situation where she had no real control. The beast, which Kael'thar called Fang, was surprisingly intelligent. Its dark eyes watched Ilara with what seemed like curiosity, and occasionally it would rumble, a sound like distant thunder that she came to recognize as contentment. The orc warriors remained silent around her, showing a wary respect that was unnerving in its intensity. As the sun climbed toward noon, the landscape shifted from the gentle hills of her valley to rougher terrain. Pine forests gave way to rocky slopes, and in the distance, mountains rose like the teeth of sleeping giants. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of snow from the high peaks and wildflowers from the lower meadows. Kael'thar finally broke the silence, slowing Fang to walk beside Ilara. You must have questions. I will answer what I can. Ilara glanced up at him. In daylight, away from the tension of the village square, she could study him more carefully. The scars that covered his exposed skin told stories of violence, but his eyes held a sharp intelligence that contradicted the simple warrior she had initially assumed him to be. Why did you really kneel? What does my mark mean to you personally, not just to ancient oaths and prophecies? He considered this, clearly unused to speaking of personal matters. When I was young, barely past my trials to manhood, my clan was destroyed in a territorial war. I wandered alone, ready to die rather than seek shelter with the murderers of my people. An old shaman found me starving in the Blackwood Forest. He fed me, healed me, and while I recovered, he taught me the old stories. Stories most orcs have forgotten. Kael'thar shifted in his saddle, his armor creaking. He told me of a time before the kingdoms fractured, before humans and orcs saw each other as enemies. The Moonborn, he said, were chosen by the goddess Luneth to bridge the divide. They could speak to any heart, see the truth in any soul. Under their guidance, the lands knew true peace for 3 generations. Then came the Sundering War, a conflict so terrible that it nearly destroyed all civilization. The Moonborn tried to stop it, but they were betrayed and hunted. Without them, the peace shattered, and we have been fighting ever since. He looked down at her, and Elara saw something vulnerable in his expression. I joined King Urgoth's forces because I believed his vision of unity through conquest was the only path left. Better a hard peace under one ruler than endless war between hundreds of petty kingdoms. But when I saw your mark, I remembered the shaman's words. He said that if a true Moonborn ever returned, it would be a test, a choice between continuing the cycle of violence or breaking it. I knelt because I want to believe there's another way. Elara absorbed this, her mind churning. But what if I can't live up to these legends? I'm just a shepherd. I've never led anyone, never made decisions that affected more than which field to graze the sheep in. What if this mark is a mistake? The mark does not make mistakes, said a new voice. Elara turned to find the older scarred warrior had ridden closer. I am Throck, Second Blade. I have served longer than any in this company. I've seen much in my years, but never a Moonborn mark activate. The fact that it blazed in response to danger means it recognized the threat and responded. The power is in you, girl. Whether you know how to use it yet is another matter. Throck fought in the border wars 20 years past, Kael'thar added. He has seen more death than most. If he believes in the mark's authenticity, you should trust his judgment. The day wore on, and as they traveled, other warriors began to speak with Elara. Groth, the young orc who had questioned Kael'thar earlier, admitted he had never seen his commander show deference to anyone except King Urgoth himself. It shook me, Groth confessed. Made me think there's more to the world than I've been taught. A female warrior named Skara, her black hair braided with silver rings, shared a memory of her grandmother speaking of the Moonborn. She said they could end feuds with a word, that enemies would lay down arms in their presence. I thought it myth, grandmother's tales to help children sleep. But you are real. The mark is real. As they made camp that evening in a clearing surrounded by ancient oaks, Elara found herself sitting by the fire with these warriors who hours ago she had feared. They shared their rations with her, tough dried meat and hardy travel bread, and someone produced a flask of something strong that burned going down but warmed her from the inside. Kael'thar sat across the fire from her, sharpening his blade with methodical strokes. Tomorrow we will reach the Crossroads Fort. It's a way station between territories where messengers and supplies are coordinated. I must send word to the capital about our situation, but I will word it carefully. King Urgoth is a strategic thinker, but he is also suspicious of threats to his power. Will he see me as a threat? Elara asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. He will see you as either a powerful tool or a dangerous enemy, Kael'thar replied bluntly. Our task is to ensure he chooses the former. If we can convince him that your return fulfills prophecy in a way that strengthens his rule, rather than challenges it, you might survive the meeting. And if we can't convince him, Kael'thar's expression darkened, then we will face a different kind of battle, one I hope to avoid. That night, Elara lay in the tent they had erected for her, listening to the sounds of the camp. Orc voices speaking in their native tongue, the crackle of the fire, the night birds calling from the forest. She touched the mark on her arm, tracing the silver lines that had upended her entire existence. Mother, she whispered to the darkness, I wish you were here to explain this. I wish I understood what you were protecting me from and what you hoped I might become. The mark pulsed once, faintly, as though responding to her words, and in that pulse, Elara felt something stir deep inside her. Not quite knowledge, but an awareness, a sense that she was connected to something vast and ancient, a legacy written in starlight and moonbeams, in blood and sacrifice. She didn't understand it yet, but she could feel it waiting. Like a door she had never noticed before, waiting for her to find the key. Sleep came eventually, and with it, dreams of silver courts and shining warriors, of a woman who looked like her but wore a crown of lunar light, of choices yet to come that would determine the fate of nations. The crossroads, fort loomed ahead, a massive structure of dark stone that commanded the intersection of 3 major trade routes. Banners bearing King Urgoth's symbol, a crimson fist clutching lightning, snapped in the wind from multiple towers. Elara felt her courage falter at the sight of such military might. This was real. This was the power of the kingdom that had swallowed so many others. They were met at the gates by a commander of the fort, an orc even larger than Kael'thar, with ritual scars covering his bald head. "First Blade," he greeted with a salute. "We received no word of your arrival. Your circuit through the valley territories is not due to be completed for another week." "Circumstances have changed, Commander Vorak," Kael'thar replied formally. "I require immediate access to your long-distance communications. I must send word to the capital marked for the king's eyes only." Vorak's gaze slid to Elara, and she saw the calculation there. "And the human? She is not branded. She is not in chains. Explain this irregularity. She's under my protection by right of the old oaths. That is all you need to know for now." Kael'thar's voice carried unmistakable command, and after a tense moment, Vorak stepped aside. The fort's interior was a maze of stone corridors and military efficiency. Soldiers drilled in the courtyard. Smiths hammered at weapons in open forges, and the smell of leather oil and metal polish hung heavy in the air. Elara was escorted to a private chamber, while Kael'thar went to compose his message to the king. She stood at the narrow window, looking out over the landscape beyond the fort. From this height, she could see for miles. Farmlands stretched to the west, villages sending up cooking smoke in the distance. To the north, the mountains dominated the horizon, and somewhere beyond those peaks lay the capital, where King Urgoth the Uniter held court. The door opened, and she expected Kael'thar, but instead found Throck entering with a tray of food. "You should eat," he said gruffly, setting it on the small table. "The commander is arguing with the fort's officers. They do not understand why he shows you deference, and it makes them nervous. Will they try to hurt me?" Elara asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Throck shook his head. "Not while Kael'thar lives. His reputation is such that no one here would dare challenge him directly. But you should understand something, girl. What you represent threatens the very foundation of the current power structure. King Urgoth has built his empire on the principle that only through strength and submission can unity be achieved. The Moonborn represented unity through willing cooperation. These are opposing philosophies." He moved to the window, standing beside her. "I have followed Kael'thar for 12 years. He's the finest warrior I've ever known, but more than that, he's a thinker. He questions orders when they violate honor. He protects the weak when others would simply crush them. In you, he sees a chance for something different. But it will cost him, possibly everything." "I never asked for this," Elara said, frustration bubbling up. "I never wanted to be part of prophecies or ancient bloodlines. I just wanted to live my life in peace." "Peace," Throck repeated, as if tasting the word. "I was 40 years old before I learned that word in the common tongue. In Orcish, we have no single word for peace. Our closest equivalent translates to temporary absence of war. That should tell you something about my people, about what King Urgoth promises versus what you might offer." Before Elara could respond, alarms began to ring throughout the fort. Bells clanged with urgent rhythm, and she could hear shouting from the corridors. Throck's hand went to his weapon immediately, his entire body tensing. Kael'thar burst through the door moments later, his expression grim. "We have a problem." "A messenger arrived from the capital while I was composing my report. King Urgoth already knows about you. Someone from your village sent word ahead, likely hoping for favor or gold." Elara's heart sank. "What does that mean?" "It means the king has sent his executioners. They are his elite killers, orcs who have forsaken the old oaths in favor of absolute loyalty to Urgoth alone. They are not bound by the same codes that hold me. Their orders will be simple: secure the Moonborn or kill her. They cannot allow a rival source of authority to exist. How long do we have? Throck asked, already moving toward the door. They are a day behind us, moving fast. But Commander Vorak has just informed me that he has orders to detain us until they arrive. He was apologetic, but he is a loyalist. He will not disobey a direct command from the capital. Ilara felt the walls closing in. So we're trapped? Kael'thar met her eyes, and in that moment she saw the weight of the decision he was making. We have two choices. We can stay, wait for the executioners, and I can try to negotiate for your life. The king might be convinced to see you as an asset, rather than a threat, but it would mean surrendering your freedom entirely. You would become a symbol for his reign, a puppet to legitimize his rule. And the other choice? We run. We fight our way out of this fort if necessary, and head for the free cities beyond the king's current reach. It would make us fugitives, branded as traitors. Every orc warrior in the kingdom would hunt us. But you would remain free to choose your own path. He paused, then added quietly, It would also mean I break my oath to my king. Everything I have built, my position, my honor in his eyes. It would be forfeit. Ilara looked between Kael'thar and Throck. These warriors, who had shown her more protection in 2 days than she had any right to expect. Why would you give up everything for me? You barely know me. Kael'thar stepped closer, and for the first time she saw the facade of the hardened commander crack completely. Because the shaman who saved me, who taught me the old stories, he made me promise something before he died. He said that if I ever encountered something truly worth believing in, something that could change the world, I should have the courage to sacrifice everything for it. I have been a weapon for King Urgoth, a tool of conquest. But you represent the possibility of something different, a return to the old ways, where strength served justice rather than ambition. I believe in that possibility more than I believe in my king's empire. Throck nodded agreement. I am too old to serve another decade of endless war. If there is even a chance that you can offer something better, I will stand with my commander. The others in our company will follow our lead. Ilara felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the impossible situation. She thought of her grandmother, her village, the simple life she had known. Then she thought of all the other villages, all the people living under the weight of the Orc King's conquest. She thought of what Kael'thar said about the Moonborn, offering unity through willing cooperation, not force. She reached down and pulled up her sleeve, exposing the mark fully. In the lamplight of the chamber, it seemed to shimmer with an inner radiance, responding to the intensity of the moment. I don't know if I can live up to the legends, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I don't know if I have the power or wisdom to change anything, but I know I can't become a puppet for a conqueror. I can't betray what my mother died protecting, even if I don't fully understand it yet. She looked up at Kael'thar and made her choice. We run. We fight if we must, and whatever happens, we face it as allies, choosing our own path, not as master and servant, bowing to a tyrant's will. Kael'thar's expression transformed, a fierce pride lighting his amber eyes. Then we leave immediately. Throck, gather our warriors. Tell them the truth of what we face and give them the choice to stay or come. I will not command any to follow me into exile. As Throck rushed to obey, Kael'thar began pulling weapons from the chamber's storage, arming himself for battle. We will head north into the Stormcrest Mountains. It is dangerous terrain, full of ice trolls and worse, but the king's forces will have difficulty following. Beyond the peaks lie the free cities. If we can reach them, you will have time to understand your power, to learn what it means to be Moonborn. And then, Ilara asked, accepting the dagger he handed her, feeling its unfamiliar weight. And then we decide what kind of world we want to build. Whether we hide and hope the king forgets us, or whether we fight for the vision your ancestors represented. But that decision can wait until we survive the next few days. The door opened again, and Groth entered, followed by Skara and the rest of their company. "Commander!" Groth said, his young face set with determination. "Throck told us what you face." We stand with you, all of us. You've led us honorably for years. If you say this is right, then we trust your judgment." Ilara felt something crack open inside her, a warmth spreading from her mark throughout her body. These warriors bred for conquest, choosing loyalty and principle over their king's command. It was exactly the kind of unity the Moonborn were meant to inspire. People coming together by choice rather than force. "Thank you," she whispered, and meant it with everything she had. They moved quickly through the fort's corridors, using Kael'thar's authority to bypass checkpoints until they reached the stables. But as they prepared to mount their war beasts, Commander Vorak appeared, with a contingent of soldiers blocking the exit. "I cannot let you leave, First Blade," Vorak said, his voice heavy with regret. "The king's orders are absolute. Stand down, and I promise you will be treated fairly." Kael'thar drew his blade, and his warriors did the same. The tension ratcheted to a breaking point. "Stand aside, Vorak. I do not wish to fight you." "Nor I you," Vorak replied, genuine regret in his voice. "But duty demands—" "Wait!" Ilara's voice rang out with unexpected authority, and to her shock, everyone froze. The mark on her arm had begun to glow again, brighter than before, casting silver light across the stable that pushed back the shadows. She stepped forward, positioning herself between the two groups of warriors, her heart hammering but her voice steady. "Please, there has been enough violence. Commander Vorak, you are an honorable soldier following orders. I understand that. But those orders would make me a prisoner or a corpse. Is that truly the justice King Urgoth promises? Is that the unity he claims to build?" Vorak stared at her, at the glowing mark that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, and something flickered in his battle-hardened eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or recognition of something he had thought lost to legend, something that stirred ancient memories in his blood. "The Moonborn," he breathed, his weapon lowering slightly. "By the old gods, the stories are true. I don't know what I am yet," Ilara admitted, her voice carrying to every warrior present, both those loyal to Kael'thar and those sworn to Vorak. The mark's light seemed to amplify her words, giving them weight beyond mere sound. "But I know that if I'm to represent anything, it should be the choice to build something better than endless conquest. You can stop us, Commander. You can fight, and some of you will die. Good warriors on both sides will bleed on these stones. Maybe we'll die too. Or you can let us pass and report that we overpowered you. The choice is yours, but make it knowing that this moment might be remembered as the beginning of something new, or just another bloody skirmish in an endless war." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the restless shifting of war beasts and the distant sound of wind howling through the fort's towers. Ilara could see the conflict playing across Vorak's scarred face, duty warring with something deeper, something the mark had awakened in him. Then, slowly, as if the weight of centuries pressed upon his shoulders, Vorak sheathed his weapon. The sound of steel sliding into leather echoed like a pronouncement. "My guards were overpowered," he said carefully, his voice carrying the cadence of official report, but his eyes holding a different truth. He spoke loudly enough for all his soldiers to hear. "The First Blade and his company escaped before I could properly secure them. Despite my best efforts, they breached the perimeter. It is my failure, and I will report it as such to the king, accepting whatever punishment he deems fit." He stepped aside, creating a clear path to freedom, and gestured for his soldiers to do the same. Though confusion rippled through their ranks, discipline held, and they obeyed their commander. Vorak met Kael'thar's gaze directly, warrior to warrior, and something passed between them, understanding, respect, perhaps even a silent promise of future alliance, should the winds of fate blow favorably. Kael'thar nodded once, a gesture heavy with significance, the acknowledgement of a debt that could never be fully repaid. "Your honor will be remembered, Commander. When the history of this age is written, your name will be spoken with respect." "Save your gratitude for survival, First Blade," Vorak replied gruffly. "The executioners are less than a day behind, and they will not be swayed by glowing marks or pretty words. They are the king's true believers, and they will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Ride hard, ride fast, and may whatever gods still listen grant you the fortune you'll desperately need." The group mounted quickly, movements efficient despite the tension thrumming through the air. Ilara found herself lifted onto Fang behind Kael'thar, his armor warm against her back, solid and reassuring. Within moments they were thundering through the fort's gates, hooves striking sparks from ancient stone as they burst into the open lands beyond. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson that seemed almost prophetic. Behind them, the Crossroads fort diminished into the distance, becoming a dark silhouette against the burning sky. Ahead, the Stormcrest Mountains rose like the spine of some primordial beast, their snow-covered peaks catching the dying light and throwing it back in shades of pink and gold. They rode for hours without stopping, pushing their war beast to the limits of endurance. The landscape transformed around them as they climbed elevation, spring grasses giving way to hardier shrubs, then to bare rock and patches of old snow that lingered in shadowed crevices. The air grew thinner and colder, each breath visible in the gathering dusk. When they finally stopped to rest the animals in a sheltered ravine, the stars had begun their nightly procession across the heavens. Ilara slid from Fang's back on trembling legs, her muscles screaming from hours of hard riding. Kael'thar caught her elbow as she stumbled, his grip gentle despite his strength. "You did well back there," he said quietly, as the others began setting up a minimal camp with practiced efficiency. "What you said to Vorak, the way you used the Mark's presence without even understanding how, that was the gift of the Moonborn. The ability to touch hearts, to make people see beyond their immediate circumstances to larger truths. It saved lives today, perhaps including our own." Ilara looked up at him, seeing past the fearsome exterior to the complex person beneath. "I didn't plan it. The words just came. When the Mark glowed, it was like I could feel everyone's emotions, their fear, their doubt, their hope. Vorak didn't want to fight us. I could sense it. He was looking for a reason to let us go." "And you gave him one," Throck added, approaching with water skins and dried rations. "You gave him permission to follow his conscience instead of blind orders. That's a rare gift, girl. Use it wisely, because it can be as dangerous as any blade when wielded without thought." They ate quickly and without fire, not willing to risk smoke that might be spotted by pursuing forces. As the others took turns keeping watch, Ilara found herself sitting beside Kael'thar on a flat rock, both of them staring up at the impossible vastness of the stars. "Tell me about the free cities," Ilara said, needing something to focus on besides her exhaustion and fear. "What are they like? Will they shelter us?" Kael'thar considered this, his breath misting in the cold mountain air. "The free cities are what remains of the old coalition that refused to bow to King Urgoth's expansion. 7 cities, each independent but bound by mutual defense pacts. They value personal liberty above all else, sometimes to a fault. They are chaotic, vibrant, dangerous places where anyone can rise or fall based on their own merits rather than their birth. They have no love for the Orc King, but they are also pragmatic. Sheltering us could provoke a war they're not ready to fight, so we might not be welcome even there," Ilara said, feeling her hope dim slightly. "We might not," Kael'thar agreed. "But there are those in the free cities who remember the old stories, scholars and historians who have preserved knowledge that King Urgoth would prefer forgotten. If we can reach them, if we can prove what you are, they might see you as an opportunity rather than a liability. A Moonborn could unite the free cities in ways their councils never could. You could become the symbol of resistance they've desperately needed." Ilara touched her mark, feeling its warmth even through her sleeve. "I keep thinking about my grandmother, about my village. What will happen to them when the executioners arrive and find me gone? Commander Vorak will report that you were taken by force, that your village had no knowledge of our plans. It should protect them from direct retribution, at least initially." Kael'thar's voice held uncertainty, though, and Ilara heard what he didn't say, that there were no guarantees, that King Urgoth might punish them anyway simply to send a message. "I should have stayed," Ilara whispered. Let them take me, if it meant keeping everyone safe. Kael'thar turned to face her directly, his amber eyes intense in the starlight. And then what? Live as a puppet, paraded before conquered peoples as proof that even the legendary Moonborn bow to the Orc King. Watch as your gift is twisted into a tool of oppression. Your grandmother was right to send you away. Some things are worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary. Freedom is one of them. The truth of what you represent is another. Before Ilara could respond, Skara hissed a warning from her watch position. Movement on the southern trail. Multiple riders, moving fast even in darkness. The camp exploded into silent, efficient action. Within seconds, they were mounted and moving again, climbing higher into the mountains on treacherous paths, barely visible in the starlight. Behind them, Ilara could hear the distant sounds of pursuit, war cries in Orcish that echoed off stone walls. The baying of tracking hounds bred for relentless hunting. The executioners had found their trail far sooner than anyone had hoped. The next hours became a nightmare of desperate flight through increasingly dangerous terrain. The path narrowed to barely more than a ledge in places, with sheer drops on one side and vertical rock walls on the other. One of their war beasts lost its footing, and only Groth's quick reflexes saved both mount and rider from plummeting into the darkness below. The sounds of pursuit grew closer, and then suddenly they burst from a narrow passage into a wider area and found themselves trapped. The path ended in a small plateau, surrounded by cliffs on three sides, with only the way they'd come offering escape. A dead end. We fight here, Kael'thar announced, dismounting and drawing his weapons. The others followed suit, forming a defensive line across the narrow entrance to the plateau. If we can hold them until dawn, the light might reveal another path. Ilara, stay behind us. Whatever happens, you must survive. But Ilara's attention was caught by something else. On the far wall of the plateau, partially hidden by shadow and centuries of weathering, she could see markings. Symbols that looked hauntingly familiar, that seemed to resonate with the mark on her arm. She stumbled toward them, ignoring Kael'thar's protest. Her hand reaching out to touch the ancient stone. The moment her fingers made contact, the mark on her arm blazed with light, so brilliant it turned night into day. The symbols on the wall answered, glowing with the same silver radiance, and suddenly the solid stone began to move. A doorway opened where none had existed before, revealing a passage that led deeper into the mountain, illuminated by veins of luminescent crystal that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. A moonborn sanctuary. Throck breathed in awe. The old texts spoke of them, hidden refugees created by your ancestors. I thought they were myths. The sound of the executioner's approach grew louder, boots on stone and weapons being drawn. They had mere seconds to decide. Inside, Kael'thar commanded, pushing Ilara toward the revealed passage. Everyone inside now! They plunged into the ancient corridor just as the first of the executioners burst onto the plateau. Ilara was the last through, and as she crossed the threshold, she felt the doorway respond to her presence. The stone began to close, grinding back into place with the weight of millennia. Through the narrowing gap, she caught a glimpse of the pursuing orcs, massive warriors in black armor decorated with the king's crimson fist, their faces twisted with fury and religious zeal. Their leader, taller than even Kael'thar, and bearing a sword that seemed to drink in light, pointed directly at her. "The king will have you, Moonborn," he roared. "You cannot hide from destiny. You cannot hide from him." Then the stone sealed completely, and the sound of the outside world vanished, replaced by profound silence and the gentle glow of crystal light. They stood in a corridor that stretched into the mountain's heart, ancient and waiting. Preserved by magic, Ilara was only beginning to understand. "We're safe," Groth said, his young voice filled with relief and wonder. "We actually made it." "For now," Kael'thar corrected, but even his pragmatic assessment couldn't diminish the momentary triumph they all felt. Against impossible odds, they had escaped. They had survived. Ilara looked down at her mark, watching as its light slowly faded back to the faint silvery glow she'd always known. But something had changed. She could feel it, a connection to this place, to the power that had built it. Her ancestors had created sanctuaries throughout the world, safe havens for those who needed them. And somehow her blood remembered how to open them. "Come on," she said, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. "Let's see what else my family left behind." They ventured deeper into the mountain, following the crystal-lit corridor as it wound through the living rock. The walls were carved with murals depicting scenes from ancient history, humans and orcs working side by side, building cities and celebrating festivals, living in harmony under the guidance of figures bearing the Moonborn mark. It was a vision of a world that had existed once and might exist again, if they were brave enough to fight for it. The corridor eventually opened into a vast chamber that took Ilara's breath away. It was a library and sanctuary combined, with walls lined with scrolls and books that had been preserved through the centuries. Crystal formations grew from floor to ceiling, their light revealing comfortable living spaces, training areas, and what looked like a map room with detailed charts of the entire known world. "This is incredible," Skara whispered, moving to examine a weapons rack that held blades of a design unlike anything in the modern world. "Everything is perfectly preserved. It's as if they just stepped out and expected to return any moment." "In a way they did," came a new voice, and everyone spun toward the sound, weapons raised. From behind a pillar stepped a figure, an old human woman with silver hair and eyes that held the same luminous quality as Ilara's mark. She wore robes that seemed woven from moonlight itself, and when she smiled, it was with recognition and deep relief. "Welcome home, daughter of the Moonborn line," the woman said, bowing slightly. "I am Silvara, guardian of this sanctuary. I have waited a very, very long time for one of the blood to return." Ilara could only stare, her mind reeling with questions. How could this woman have been waiting? How long had she been here alone? And most importantly, what did she know about what Ilara was meant to become? "I know you have many questions," Silvara continued, her ancient eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "And I will answer them all. But first you must rest. You have traveled far and faced great danger. The executioners cannot breach this sanctuary. The magic that seals it responds only to Moonborn blood. You are safe here, perhaps for the first time since your mark awakened.
So rest, young one."
Rest, and when you wake, your real education will begin." Ilara felt the exhaustion of the past days crash over her all at once. Yelthar placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, and she leaned into it gratefully, accepting the support of this warrior who had given up everything to protect her. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to him but to all of them, Throck, Groth, Skara, and the others who had chosen loyalty and hope over certainty and power, as Silvara led them deeper into the sanctuary, showing them rooms prepared centuries ago for this exact purpose. Ilara felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just running, no longer simply reacting to events beyond her control. Here, in this place built by her ancestors, surrounded by allies who had proven their worth in blood and sacrifice, she could finally take a breath. She could learn. She could prepare. The chase would continue. King Urgoth and his executioners would never stop hunting her. The world outside remained divided and war-torn, crying out for the unity that only a Moonborn could provide. But in this moment, in this sanctuary hidden within the mountain's heart, Ilara allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt since that morning when the fog had clung to her valley and her life had changed forever. She felt ready, ready to learn who she truly was, ready to embrace the destiny that had been written in her blood, ready to become what prophecy demanded and what the world desperately needed. The mark on her arm pulsed once more, gentle and warm, like the approval of ancestors long gone, but never truly absent. And in that pulse, Ilara heard a promise, not from the mark itself, but from her own heart. She would not let them down. Not her mother who had died protecting her, not her grandmother who had sent her into danger to save her, not Kael'thar and his warriors who had sacrificed everything to stand beside her, not the countless people suffering under the weight of endless war. She would become the Moonborn, the world remembered, and the leader it needed. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, she would forge a new path forward. The journey had only just begun, but already she could see the shape of what was to come. Trials and triumphs, betrayals and bonds, battles fought with both steel and words. And at the end of it all, a choice that would determine whether peace returned to the shattered lands, or whether the final war Silvara had mentioned would drown everything in blood and fire. But that was tomorrow's burden. Tonight, surrounded by friends in a sanctuary built by love and hope, Ilara finally allowed herself to sleep. And in her dreams, she saw not nightmares of pursuit and danger, but visions of what could be, a world united not by conquest, but by choice, where the mark on her arm represented not power over others, but the power to bring them together. It was a beautiful dream, and when she woke, she would begin the long, difficult work of making it real.